When disaster strikes, the Hyatt Regency walkway and the Pemberton Mill collapse. How does cutting corners lead to injury? The Hyatt Regency walkway disaster. On July 17, 1981, two suspended walkways at the Hyatt Regency Hotel in Kansas City collapsed. 114 lives were lost and 216 were injured. This event marked one of the deadliest structural failures in the history of the United States. The collapse occurred around 7:05 p.m. during a tea dance located in the hotel's atrium. Approximately 1,600 guests were present. Three walkways were located around the atrium connecting the second, third, and fourth floors. The fourth floor walkway failed first, falling onto the second floor walkway and then landing on the lobby floor. In 1980, when the hotel opened for business in downtown Kansas City, many of its features were considered advanced. The atrium was especially considered so as it connected the hotel to a neighboring complex. It was just a year later when the sky bridges gave way due to a critical design flaw. The original design for these walkways included steel rods to support both the second and fourth floor walkways separately. However, during construction, a change was made to the design that split the rod into two segments. This in turn doubled the load on the connection to the fourth floor. At this, the walkway could no longer support the intended weight and led to a cataclysmal failure. Most of the lives lost were those standing in the lobby and the second floor walkway as the structure and other objects fell on top of them. The investigation that followed found that a manufacturer had changed the design of the rod connections to simplify construction. This is believed to be the error that caused the collapse, but the surviving walkway on the third floor was also found to have been barely capable of supporting the expected weight. There was also an indication of structural integrity issues when in October of 1979 a large section of the roof caved in due to a failure of another connective device. The investigation also concluded that the manufacturer's oversight came very far from meeting the existing standards and codes, yet inspectors didn't flag this. The engineers were not charged with criminal negligence, though they were stripped of license and not allowed to practice in the trade. Backhouse 2024. Rebuilding, liability, legacy, and its limits. The hotel later reopened with just one walkway that was supported by columns. Backhouse 2024. Today, the hotel has been renamed the Sheraton Kansas City Hotel at Crown Center. One author makes note of the case. Unless they're native Kansas Cityans or Midwesterners of a certain age, today's guests would not remember. Going further, they state that management would like it to be this way. The hotel managers know it's a part of their history and they say they're respectful of it, but that they're intending to move forward in a different light. The man who opened the hotel was also the owner of Hallmark cards. Don Hall had hoped to make Kansas City, Missouri a major convention destination in the Midwest. The Hyatt Regency Kansas City was opened near Hallmark Cards' corporate headquarters, and it did become a popular destination for many on Friday nights. The disaster shifted that for a while, and the Halls published a history of the disaster that stated how the tragedy was large enough and the city was small enough for almost everyone to know someone personally affected by the event. It took an emotional toll on many, and it seemed it would be a financial toll as well because the hotel and Hallmark cards were major employers in the area. But they were determined to turn things around, and within 18 months, the company accepted liability and began working on a settlement package for more than $140 million. In 1985, as the investigators concluded that the blame was on the engineers, the owners of the hotel were acquitted. Many believe that the Hall's action to settle lawsuits and not wait to see who was at fault helped them move forward. They were also members of the community and gave back, which led efforts. The Halls made a memorial for all the lives lost and the first responders who were on the scene. Sheraton Hotels and Resorts took over operation of the hotel in 2011 and pledged donations to the remembrance. The tea dances, like the one held the night of the disaster, were no longer held, but the hotel began hosting wine tastings and other events. It claims to have the largest ballroom in the city and holds many wedding receptions and other local events. The company once had a revolving restaurant called Skies, which closed under Sheraton's management. Now, 65% of their business is from conventions and 35% is leisure. Hall believes that the hotel's legacy will remain in its ability to fulfill the original mission of drawing more convention business to Kansas City instead of the tragedy. They draw in convention guests and tourists, which drive spending and inevitably more jobs. The hotel's contributions to the community and the economy speak to its continued success. Five Coat Campbell, 2014. Pemberton Mill collapse. On the 10th of January 1860, the Pemberton Mill collapsed. This event is noted as one of the deadliest industrial disasters in the history of the United States. The event was marked by the deaths of 90 to 145 workers and helped highlight the needs for better safety regulations. Built in 1853 and located in Lawrence, Massachusetts, the Pemberton Mill was a large textile factory. On the late afternoon of January 10, 1860, at approximately 4:30 p.m., a section of the mill had collapsed, leaving workers trapped beneath rubble. At the time, 800 or so workers were in the mill, many of which were women and children, and many were immigrants. The event resulted in the immediate deaths of 90 to 145 people, and 166 more were injured. Rescue efforts were also slowed as a fire broke out due to a lamp. As the alarms rang and those not immediately lost but trapped under the rubble cried for help, nearly an entire community came to rescue. The issue was it was getting dark. Many did not know where each call for help came from. John Lowell and J. Pickering Putnam built the Pemberton Mill, 280 feet long, 84 feet wide, and $850,000 into production. The Essex Company, led by the supervision of highly regarded engineer Charles Bigelow, built the mill. Bigelow had also built a dam, a canal, a machine shop, and other mills. In 1857, there was financial panic to which Lowell and Putnam sold the mill to George Howe and David Nevins for $500,000. These two partners then proceeded to fill the mill with increasingly more heavy machinery to increase profits. At the time of the collapse, the mill held 2,700 spindles and 700 looms. The owners were making $1.5 million a year. Many of the workers in the building were from Maine and New Hampshire, but more than half had come from Ireland during the potato famine. I don't have time to go into all of this right now, but I did speak on some of Ireland's history, not the potato famine yet. But if you would like to read that, it is linked in the Patreon and Substack links in the description. It's called Why Is There a Drink Called the Irish Car Bomb and Why Is That Name Insensitive? But basically, the potato famine was man made. Aftermath. Jesse Glover oversaw repairs. He admitted he thought the building was weak as it had thin walls and overly large windows. John B. Tuttle, who was managing the brickwork, told architect Charles Bigelow he thought the walls were not sufficient for the building. A jury then found Charles Bigelow responsible for the collapse because he had allowed malformed cast iron columns to support the structure. Charles claimed he knew nothing of the problems with the pillars. He said the original owners bought the building materials and approved their use. Bigelow did not go to prison, however, in fact, no one received any punishment for what seemed by all means a completely preventable disaster. Some modern analysts also found the owners had put too many heavy textile machines on the fourth floor. This event is considered the worst industrial incident in Massachusetts history and rivals the Triangle Shirtwaist Fire 50 years later. Landrigan, 2015. I thought about including information on that event as well, but chose not to do so for two reasons. The first was I thought that case was more well known, even more so for it to be mentioned in an obscure article. The second reason was I chose the original two cases from personal inspiration and intended direct correlation to the point I'm making towards the end of this. While I do think I could fit the case in both lengthwise and in the main points, I felt it best to keep it simplified. If I listed every time a rich person or a lazy person did something that led to the deaths of many, I'd have an entire book and probably more several. OSHA regulations are signed in blood. Wrapping things up, I have a Few conclusions. If you came to the same conclusions, thank you for having some sense. The very first is that cutting corners to save money and or time will always lead to more work and more harm in the long run. OSHA regulations and building codes are put into place due to the lives that have already been lost. If you choose an oversight that puts you into danger, that's one thing, but to put the lives of hundreds of others in danger is an egregious miscalculation and an abuse of power. No amount of money is worth the lives of my loved ones, and I hope and assume, perhaps naively, that everyone else agrees. The last thing is that the difference in philanthropy is a key that many disregard. In the case of the Hyatt Regency walkway, one manufacturer made a decision that cost much more than the time it took to do it right. The people that owned the building were philanthropic and cared about the communities they impacted. Does that mean they're incapable of trusting the wrong people? No, but it doesn't make them accountable in the afterlife over lives lost. However, with all of the owners of the Pemberton Mill, both the original and those managing during the time of disaster were at direct fault. The original owners wanted to cut costs and cut corners in the building, and the following owners prioritized profit over people. The amount of money they would have given simply to support those grieving certainly couldn't have been worth cutting corners if they'd known. But often, people don't have to pay for their mistakes in this lifetime. With all of that being said, all of my references will be provided in the writing in the description below, either the Substack or the Patreon link. Both of them have the same writing, just formatted differently. And I just want to say thank you so much for learning, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!